Today I want to share a personal story on how starting a self-love practice literally saved my life. There was a time where I hit a complete emotional rock bottom, and if you're there right now, then this video is for you. I'm going to share my story, and then I'm going to share 3 practices that I unknowingly started doing that completely changed my life. And if you relate with this, then these practices might also help pull you out of that kind of depth of despair that you really feel like you're at when you hit that rock bottom. So years ago, I was dating somebody, and he was notorious for canceling plans, not following through on his word. He really wasn't trustworthy, but at the time, unknowingly, I was codependent, and I really didn't know how to leave him. Quite literally couldn't leave him. Felt there was a barrier there. And I actually recorded a video a little while ago. I will pin that in the comments or in the description if you want to go deeper into codependency and stuff with relationships. But there was a time where I remember literally sitting on my bed, like just sitting down on the edge of my bed. I can like visualize myself there still. And I just broke down. He had just canceled our plans for like, the 100th time. It wasn't anything new, but it still hit me as hard every time he canceled them. And I remember just like crying and feeling just like I was at the low of lows. And it really kind of woke me up, because in that moment of just complete and utter emotional turmoil, I had this realization, because this was, this is just an ongoing thing with him. And I had also come out of a very abusive, very emotionally abusive marriage before I met this guy. And I didn't realize how, I don't want to say damaged, but I didn't realize how much that affected me. So much so that I couldn't see certain things in people. And when I was sitting on the edge of my bed that day, something hit me like a ton of bricks. It was like, in order to change anything in my life, and at that very moment, changing the thing that I really felt like I needed to change was the people that I kept attracting into my life, the relationships that I kept attracting. And I realized that in order to change any of that, I had to change myself. Like, quite literally, it was like this split moment, like, wow, in order to change anything, I have to change. And so I started taking the evenings. Once I was done, this was when I was working part-time, and I was really working on my business. And so once that time hit where I was like done for the day, I decided to take that time for me to sit in silence and just feel and see what comes up within me. I had never done this before. I was always, being codependent, being alone was uncomfortable. You might relate if maybe you're in a relationship right now where they're not good for you and you really want to leave, but you just feel like you can't, and the thing that you're scared of most is being alone. So I really forced myself here, because during this time, when I hit this rock bottom, my self-confidence was on the floor. My self-esteem was not there. I didn't really know who I was. I knew a little bit of what I liked, but I didn't know what I was made out of, like at the core, I didn't know what was driving most of my thoughts, feelings, and actions, right? I didn't know what was the thing about me that kept attracting these types of partners. I didn't know any of it. Didn't even realize that that was something that was a thing. I didn't realize I was the one attracting that into my life. I just figured, these are just the people that are here and available. I didn't really feel like there were any good people out there, like partners, good partners, healthy partners. But looking back, that was because I wasn't a healthy individual. I didn't know who I was. I didn't have the self-confidence and self-esteem. Hi, puppy. My dog is looking at me right now. It's okay. She feels what I feel. So if I'm ever dredging up past stuff, she feels it. Yeah. So basically, I didn't know who I was. Come here. I'm gonna grab her really quick. Okay. So basically, I didn't know why I was attracting this. I didn't know at the time that I needed to work on myself. I didn't know any of that. This was like before I really got into any kind of self-help, self-development, any of that. But I did know, I had this like just intuitive feeling that I needed to sit in silence with myself. And so I started doing this every night. And what came up was so many things. When you've never taken that time for yourself to really sit and be with yourself, no distractions, no phones, no TV, nothing, just quiet, silence, sitting there with yourself and your thoughts, this can be really hard. And this can also bring up a lot of stuff. But I really started loving this time because what came up was I would sit in silence. This was like the first thing I started doing. I would sit in silence. I would just let whatever thoughts come up. I'd let them come up. I would feel what I felt when those thoughts came up, and I would question it. I would ask myself, like, well, why do I feel this way? That was really like the first thing that I noticed was like, okay, emotionally I was burnt out, and feeling was intense. Like my feelings at those times were not good typically. So what I would do is I would feel into that. I'd be like, why am I feeling this right now? And then a little voice would come up and be like, well, you're thinking this. So if you're here with me and this resonates a bit with you and you've never really taken that time, really sit in silence with yourself and in a very non-judgmental way, allow what comes up. Just allow it. Allow it. If you're a journaler, it's great to like jot this down. I started writing some of this down, and it is amazing to go back and read this now, like years later when I've done all this inner work and I'm like, oh my God, this is how far I've come. It can really help, especially when you feel like you're not really making progress. Journaling and then going back, like even like 6 months or a year, and reading what you wrote, oh my God, you'll realize how far you've come. So just really sit with your feelings. Ask, where are those feeling? Why am I feeling this way? What am I thinking that's making me feel this way? And then why am I thinking those things? That's a huge one, because our subconscious mind gets programmed when we're little. So from the ages of like 0, like just being born, and even in the womb, we take on what our mothers were feeling and thinking, feeling, like we take that on. That's in our DNA. So if you know your parents were stressed out when they were about to have you, when your mom was pregnant, maybe you were born into a family dynamic that was, they were stressed about money, they were whatever it was, maybe there was violence, maybe there was emotional neglect, maybe there could be so many different things that then programs your little brain when you're in theta up until I believe around age 7. Your brain is just soaking everything in. This is your normal. This is the period of time where your little brain is just observing, creating beliefs. It just goes right into your subconscious. This is now your operating system. This is where you're operating from. If you don't become aware of it and you don't actively pick and choose what you want to keep and what you want to rewire. So for me, with the thoughts that were coming up, I was like, well, why am I thinking that way? Why do I feel that way about myself? And the huge epiphany I had while doing this was how my ex-husband used to talk to me. Okay, the abuse that I took on in my marriage was primarily verbal, emotional abuse. He was an alcoholic, and when he would drink, he would get to a point where he would black out. And this was normal. This was almost a daily blackout thing. Like, he would drink so much, and he would black out, and then it was almost like this other version of him came out, and he was a monster. He was mean. He was cruel. He was very mean, and he would just verbally attack me until he passed out for the night. Literally, it would take him passing out, from alcohol for him to stop this rant of just emotional abuse. And I remember thinking, I'm like, wait, that was exactly what Josh used to say about me. That was what he would say. Like, those were the things he was saying. And all of this abuse really happened, most of it, almost all of it, probably 99% of it was in the evening, because he would start drinking after work, if he wasn't drinking at work, and then he would get to that point in the evening. So before I went to bed every night, almost every night, I would my brain would get programmed with all this negative shit about me that wasn't even true. It wasn't even true. He was blacked out. And a lot of what he was saying was probably a projection of how he felt about himself. And I won't get into that, but yeah, that was how he spoke to me. And then, not knowingly, that's how I was now speaking to myself on an internal level. So that hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like, oh, whoa. And then that made me realize, like, oh my dear God, I need to change that. And so I started paying attention to my thoughts, and I started, and most of the time, before you get really, really tuned into this, and like just kind of have like a split awareness of like a thought that came up, a lot of our we're always thinking. So sometimes it takes a feeling to come up to realize, oh, I'm going down that path again. So really, like, pay attention to your feelings. And as you're sitting with yourself in silence and you start recognizing some patterns, you'll be able to also figure out what feelings come up when you're thinking those things. And then what you want to do is you want to like switch that narrative. You want to switch that. You want to talk more kindly to yourself. So figuring out, like, ask yourself, like, where does that self-talk come from? Do I really believe that, or was that something that someone else told me a long time ago? Really just start questioning it, asking why. Why do I feel that way? Why do I think this way? Why does that come up when X, Y, and Z happens? Just really getting curious about how you operate, how your brain works, how your thought processes work. That was the first very powerful practice that I started. And I didn't realize that this was a self-love practice, because when you're sitting with yourself and you're getting to know yourself, that's self-love. You want to get to know yourself so that you can then understand yourself, so that then you can easily love yourself. When you understand why you are the way you are, it's a lot easier to be a lot more compassionate towards yourself, especially if you have a lot of abuse in your past, a lot of trauma, a lot of things that may have shaped the way that you're thinking now about yourself and how you talk to yourself too. So that was the first thing that really started to turn the needle for me. That really, really helped me understand who I was, why I was thinking the way I was. Then I really dove into like rewiring those thought processes. And I did create I created a thought journal and a guided meditation for you guys. It is on my website. I will link it in the description. But the thought journal and the guided meditation will help you go through, if you're having trouble with this, there's a journal so that you can kind of like, right when you wake up in the morning, you can kind of start jotting down what's coming up, what are your thought processes, what are your feelings, and then the guided meditation will help you go through and like help you start to rewire that in your brain. So it's a digital product. You have instant access. It is $16.99. I would love to offer it for free, but I really 30% of all of the profits from this I'm going to be donating to Kula for Karma, which is an amazing organization that helps bring like mindfulness into communities and stuff. So it is a paid product. If you need it, it's there for you. So the second thing I started to do was I would start to look at myself in the mirror every day, and I would put my hand on my heart and I would look at myself in my eyes. Okay, look at yourself right in your eyes, and I would just say I love you. And when you do that, things are going to come up. If you've never done this before, if telling yourself that you love yourself and looking at yourself in the eyes is something you've never done before, things are going to come up. And I want you to pay attention to those things, because what came up for me first, that first time I ever did it, I instantly, my brain was like, you're a liar. You're lying. You don't love me. And that's really good to know. That's good to know. It's good to have these things come up and become aware of them, because once you're aware of what your body's like, your body's always talking to you, your thoughts, your emotions, there's triggers, your body's speaking to you all the time, but do we ever really truly listen? That is the question. So if you want to start doing that as well, I would highly suggest bringing a piece of paper in the bathroom with you. Have a place where you're just alone and you can just do this with yourself and really pay attention to the thoughts that come up. Pay attention to that initial, what comes up initially. Like, is it a sensation in your body? Does your chest kind of tighten up? Is it literally a voice in your head telling you something? Pay attention to that, because that's going to show you kind of where you don't love yourself yet. Okay, that's okay, because this is the beginning, right? So then it gives you a place to start. Like, okay, well, when I realized that I don't love myself, because my inner voice told me that very, very strongly, then I was like, okay, well, the third thing now, how do you treat someone you love? Now, I want you to picture someone right now that you really love. You love them to death. You would do anything for them, or almost anything for them. How do you treat them? How do you talk to them? Do you really pay attention to them when they're talking to you? If there's something that's very important to them, does that become important to you? I want you to pay attention to how you treat the people in your life that you really love. And I want you to start mirroring that back to yourself. So the mirror practice of telling yourself you love you, that really will help show you, like, if you're there, if you're not there, what's coming up. And then pay attention to how you're treating the people you love, so that you can then start equally doing that for yourself. And this one has a lot of impact. Like, when you start being kinder to yourself through your thoughts, your emotions are going to mimic that. They're going to equal the kindness. And then when you start to figure out why you are the way you are, and you start to treat yourself the way that you would treat someone you really love, this is gonna, when you start to really know yourself on this deeper level, this is work that not most people don't do this kind of work. But this is what truly changed my life. This is what took me out of that emotional depth of despair, like the rock bottom. Like, I started enjoying the time that I had by myself. I started to look forward to those nightly alone sessions with myself, because I was learning a lot about myself. And then when you have these tools where you know how to rewire your brain using the guided meditation and the journaling, and then you just start becoming aware on a daily basis of how you're treating yourself, how you're talking to yourself about yourself. Really become aware, and then when you catch yourself, don't beat yourself up. This was something that I actually had to kind of realize a little bit later, was that, and this also stemmed from the abuse from my ex-husband, because when I would go down the same pathways of thinking, feeling, and then I would catch myself. I would kind of start to beat myself up about it, like, oh my God, I'm still doing this, cut that part out. It's so much easier if you just, instead of going down that path, because that's another negative path, choose a path of love and compassion, okay? This takes time, especially if you've been thinking this way for a very, very long time. It's going to take some time to become aware and catch yourself every time that happens, and just switch the narrative, change it. So if you're going about your day and then you find yourself feeling kind of down and you're like, why am I feeling down? And you realize that you're saying something negative about yourself, in your head, and you're catching it, you catch it, and then basically ask yourself, is this really true? Maybe it's not even really true about yourself. And then find something else that you love about yourself. Find something that's actually a positive thing about yourself and replace that with that, right? We want to be replacing the negative with a positive. There are things about you that are wonderful, okay? And if you can't think of anything that you believe, what have other people said about you that maybe it was a compliment that's hard to take, but other people have said these things about you? Use that and start to wire that into your brain. So those are the 3 things that I started doing to get me into a self-love practice that ultimately, literally, that was the launching pad for where I was to like where I am today. And I still do all this stuff. Like, these things are not things that I just did for a little while and then stopped. I've been actively working and doing these things, and they've kind of evolved over time, because as you grow and as you shift into this newer version of you, this just more self-loving version of you, your practice will shift with you. But it's an ongoing practice that I've been doing. I forget the year that this rock bottom really hit me, but I believe it was probably in 2017. I think it was around that time. And yeah, I've been doing it ever since. So it's evolved, but it's still there for me. Like, I still catch myself every now and then, and I'm like, oh, but it's easier. It gets easier over time. So I hope these 3 things will help you. If you're still here with me and this stuff resonated with you, I just created a free community over on School, SKOOL. I will have the link in the description. It's totally free to join. It's a private community where we can go more into depth with this stuff. If you want more guidance, more help, more kind of like, and you want a community that is also kind of there, and we can, everyone can like help support each other on this journey, definitely join the community. And next week, I'm going to be sharing something about relationships that is going to probably completely change the way you view your partner and relationships forever. So hit the notification bell if that's something that interests you, and I will be there with you next week.